All right, boys, sit down.
We have meeting with Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so with that, we'll call the meeting to order today. It's 5:02 on Friday, October 22nd. I believe we have a quorum in place here. In attendance is myself, Dave Lyons, Dale Cook. Welcome, Dale, to Planning and Zoning. We appreciate your service.
Again.
Welcome back. Okay. Jimmy O'Connor and Mark Norquist, right? Okay. And we also have Fred Townsend, Bill Zolfer, and Jim Dedes. All right. So with that, I would like to, if I get a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved.
And can I get a second? Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. The next item will be to review the minutes from last meeting, which occurred. Where are they?
It was August 6th.
August 6th. Thank you. Yeah, August 6th at 5:30. Mike put out those minutes. Hope everyone get a chance to take a look at them. Assuming everyone's okay, can I get a motion to adopt those minutes?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes from.
Second. I'll second the motion.
Okay. All right. All right.
Right.
So all in favor?
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And there being none opposed, that motion has passed, right?
Do we ask for public comment now?
Is that on the agenda?
No.
But you can allow for public comment anytime you like.
Okay.
You have one.
For public comment. Do we want to open up with just a?
Oh, that's a good point. So this is a public hearing. So it seems to me that we ought to go ahead and commence with the presentation of the agenda item, and then we'll go to the public.
Yeah.
Who's probably in attendance to comment on the ordinance.
Right. Okay. So first, let's. Our topic tonight is we are here to discuss the draft ordinance regarding amending Chapter 185, Section 90, the Utilities Code of the Town of Dewey Beach, Delaware, by adding thereto a new Section 90A relating to wireless facilities and associated draft design standards. We're here to discuss. I think, Fred, if I'm okay here, I thought I'd move to ask Ron just to kind of give us a view of the changes, and then we can open up for public comment. So for the commissioners, is there opportunity to hear the changes that Ron suggested here, take us through the nature of them, and then if you have any questions, we'll get questions, and then we'll open it up to the public. With that, Ron, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So basically, CTC was contracted to make some ordinance revisions for your folks, as well as help you with siting of your small wireless facilities. So I think with the revisions and the changes that we put forth, it'll allow Dewey Beach to better manage the right-of-way small wireless facility applications and guarantee compliance not only with the FCC regs, but compliance with the town's wireless ordinance and design standards. So I believe these revisions will bring Dewey Beach.
Ron, we've got some interference and we're not sure.
Barney, could you mute your mic, please?
Okay, let's try again, Ron.
Okay. So
You don't
these-
need it. You don't need to start from the beginning. I don't think.
Yeah, we just gonna pick up where you were.
So the revisions that we're going to speak about tonight will help Dewey Beach bring in line with the necessary regulations and requirements of federal law while still respecting the integrity of your residential neighborhoods, commercial areas, and beachfront. So I think that this will put the town in a good position to start accepting future applications for small wireless facilities, making sure that they are compliant with the FCC regulations, as well as your ordinance and your design standards.
Thanks. Thank you, Ron. Any questions or comments, Ron, at this point from the commissioners?
Would now be the time to ask questions about what Verizon proposed as question when Mike sent it out? The question from Verizon from Bonnie Mack.
I think that would be fine. You're talking about written.
The written comments.
The
Yeah, there
written
were
comments.
received from Verizon.
Did we get some from AT&T also, or just from
No.
Verizon?
Just Verizon,
Okay.
right?
Just Verizon.
All right. Yeah, that would be fine to pose those to Mr. Evans. Yes.
Ron, this is Dale Cook. Verizon questioned about the use of antennas and the proposal had one type of antenna, I believe a canister. And Verizon said some people use panel antennas versus canister antennas. Is there any problem with putting both types in the ordinance?
Not at all. The language contained in there is basically boilerplate language with the rest of ordinances that we've revised for other municipalities. Most of the time, the clients, when installing 4G, they will have those canister-like antennas at the top. And then for 5G, they'll have those panel antennas. Even though in your ordinance, you do speak about antennas fitting within 3 cubic feet, we can add additional language to that, just maybe a couple words or a sentence or two that I could add in to further delineate the canister antenna from the panel antennas, but
All right.
that's no
because
problem at all.
It's up to them what type of equipment, as long as it meets our standards, but we don't want our standards to be so restrictive that they can't use something.
Right, and you don't want to be prohibitive either, so that's fine.
They also questioned the placement of antennas on as compared to our sidewalk restriction. And can we in some way say that they can place it on existing poles that are already blocking the sidewalk, but no, or replacement poles where the existing poles are, but no additional blockage of the sidewalk?
Since the right of way is always usually adjacent to a sidewalk, you couldn't actively not permit them to locate along the sidewalk. So I spoke about this with Bill and Jim as well. So you would need to permit them along the sidewalk, but it would have to be in compliance with the ADA, which is, again, what most ordinances have. So they would need to be ADA compliant.
The reason I mentioned about replacement or not additional, because there is no ability to not block part of the sidewalk in Dewey Beach. With existing, the property lines come right up to the edge of the sidewalk, and then the sidewalk, and so if there's a pole there, I can understand replacing it, allowing them to replace it, in the same spot. But we wouldn't want additional poles on the sidewalk, but we should probably allow them to replace the existing pole,
Correct.
I would think.
And I believe
Ron,
there's language. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just have one follow-on question with Dale. Is there potential that they would need additional poles in order to do coverage because of this different technology? I agree with Dale. I mean, if we don't need any additional poles, we certainly don't want them, but can we?
Well, we have a distance in there in your ordinance. So if, say, Verizon or T-Mobile or Dish or who have you come in, they have to be at least, I think you have 300 feet from, I believe it was another carrier's small wireless facility, and actually from their own wireless facility in 100 feet from another cell provider's facility. So that way they have to maintain that distance between the poles that they want to propose. So you're not having 2 or 3 right next to each other.
Well, Ron, again, as Dale Cook, that's for placement of new poles, and I understand that. But the point is, we don't want new poles. There's no way to meet ADA requirements on the sidewalks. There's only sidewalks on Highway 1, or I believe there's only sidewalks on Highway 1. On Reed, okay, but we don't want any additional poles blocking the sidewalks. But if there's an existing pole and they would not create an additional problem on the sidewalk, but could replace an existing pole, I wouldn't see why we couldn't allow them to do that.
Correct.
I guess that has to be written in some way.
I would recommend that we look at just where they're not ADA compliant. And then that would resolve the issue, because
Right.
that doesn't mean that they can't add it onto an existing pole
Or replace an existing pole.
or replace the existing pole.
You know, some of there's only, when Jim Tyler did the survey of the sidewalks and the pole, and he literally measured with the tape, just specifically each pole. And he said there was only 1 or 2 that actually reached the ADA requirement of distance on the sidewalk, even though they're horrendous the way they are, but there was only 1 that actually reached the requirement. And so if we say they can replace existing poles if they need to, but not put in an additional non-ADA compliant pole, we'd be fine, I think.
I agree.
Okay. So Fred, we have to actually modify, we would go through and modify this amendment, then we have to make a motion to amend it.
Not at this point, because we haven't gotten into the public comment
Okay.
yet. I think that this is an opportunity for you to ask some questions of the presenter. And then we need to open it up to the public. And then, quite frankly, based on what you hear, and when it comes time to amending it, you may have a number of other questions for Mr. Evans.
Okay.
And I have a friendly suggestion. Fred went through the town ordinance that we have with all the changes. And if you look on the 2-page ordinance to amend chapters, it just specifies where we made changes. And Ron, if you could just go through that, I don't know if you've got that. We covered number 3, which was wireless facilities review. And we added section under A, item I, II, and III, wireless should not be permitted. And that's what we just talked about. Are you with me, Ron?
Right, I'm grabbing that attachment.
Okay.
Jim, when you're suggesting that III would need to be changed.
Yeah, because it would have to do with the ADA compliance
Right.
issue on that, and that would
Right.
have to be modified.
Right. Okay.
And I think what Fred was just said is, this is something maybe we go through it, then you all would make your decision. as to
Decision
how
what to
you want
do, right.
proceed.
Okay.
Ron, are you with us?
Yes, I'm on that page, line 10,
Jason? All right, so go to section 2.
right?
And then number 16, we added a 7, and that was a change that was added.
Right.
And if you could just walk us through the rest of the changes.
Sure. So basically for this change, we added each applicant at the beginning of your fiscal year would have to submit an annual plan with locations of all of the proposed small wireless facilities that they are proposing for that fiscal year, as well as any existing facilities that they need to modify. So they would submit that to the town as an annual plan, along with a payment of $500 at the time of filing. Then say they propose a location that isn't on that annual plan. The annual plan would need to be amended and revised and resubmitted, at which time we would charge them, or you folks would charge them $250 for that modification or revision of their annual plan.
I think we're down now past 8B of the changes that we talked about, just so everybody's following along.
Right. And then we added, the applications will be reviewed by the town manager, town solicitor, and the wireless consultant, and all costs of review of the application shall be reimbursed to the town by the applicant. We also added in permit allocations to include the cost of materials and labor, which would be subject to a 3% permit fee cost in addition to the above fees. So I believe you folks also have a spot where you list all of your fees. So that fee structure would have to probably be amended to add the permit fee cost in there for small wireless facility applications.
Okay.
Then we go down, we're in section 3, line 51. We added some definitions for their terms in your ordinance, meaning minor modification. It's an existing wireless facility that they need to modify and does not have a substantial change according to the FCC regulations. And they need, in order for a minor modification to be considered not substantial, they need to abide within all the sizes and maximum permitted dimensions of the antennas and the cabinets and what have you on the structure. And also we added a replacement definition, which means that you actually replace an actual existing structure that you folks have in town with a new structure, and to attach the wireless facility on those as well. We also added in on line 60, the actual definition of a small cell facility. According to the FCC regulation, you folks have a restriction of 35 feet. Unless the wireless provider can prove that the 35-foot height is not sufficient. And in this case, the maximum would be 50 feet, including the antenna, and no more than 10% taller than any adjacent structure in the right of way, including the antenna. Also, it does not extend to a height greater than 50 feet or 10% above its pre-existing height as a result of the new antennas. Also, the wireless equipment could be no larger than 28 cubic feet in volume. The facilities will not require antenna registration, as well as the facility will not actually have exposure above the maximum permissible limit according to the FCC regulation. We actually have in there that they will actually need to submit RF EME reports with each application as they apply to the FCC regulations and limits. And then also each antenna located in the enclosure, we spoke about this earlier, cannot be more than 3 cubic feet in volume. That's according to the FCC regulations as well. We also added in a further definition of substantial change and eligibility facilities request in the right of way. And I think that was it. And that's it on that amendment.
One other question for you, Ron, and that was in Verizon's comment mentioned something about a waiver process.
Yes.
Or the ability to, should these standards not be able to be met, they can't get the coverage that they asked for or recommended a waiver process. Do you have any comments on that?
You do want a waiver mechanism added in there in case the applicant cannot abide by, say, a setback, maybe they're off by a few feet, or from other unforeseen issues. You do want a waiver mechanism in there, and that would be a good business case to have that in there if needed.
Is that something that other municipalities have also adopted as well?
Absolutely.
And is there language, Mr. Evans, that you could suggest to be incorporated into this to address that point?
Yes, the language that Bonnie from Verizon added in there is pretty close to the required language that we would submit for the waiver facilities request.
Ron, it's Dale Cook. Number 3, subsection 4 says the facilities do not result in human exposure to radio frequency in excess, et cetera. Who's going to be the judge of that? How do we find out? How do we enforce that?
Well, as you folks get applications from the applicant, there will be questions on there. We would like to cite up, we spoke about having a citing portal for you folks, and that's free of charge, where the applicant from your website would be directed to our citing portal. They would then enter the information about their application, as well as upload the required documents for that application according to the questions and answers. We would then get the application, put it all together, and then go through your ordinance as well as your design standards, as well as the FCC regulations, and see where they are and if an EME report is actually needed or not. And if it is, we will go through and make sure that that report does contain all the information needed to be in compliant with the certain FCC regulation.
Dale, let me ask a question. I think you were trying to get. Is there a way to monitor on an ongoing basis? I think that's what you were trying to get to, right? Is it?
Yeah, in other words, how do we know? They say it won't affect the neighbors. You know, for instance, there's one pole now that's right next to a neighbor's balcony and bedroom. You know, they say it doesn't affect. How do we know that for sure? How do we understand that?
Well, that EME report would need to be signed, sealed by a professional engineer in the state of Maryland. And then say at a later date or point when the facility is actually constructed, if you wanted to, you would have a third party come in with a radio frequency probe, and they would actually measure the emissions from that facility and record them and provide a report as to where that exposure level is in a permissible limit. That's something
Ron, I hate to be a pain in.
Would that be our expense?
Hmm?
Would that be our expense?
Yeah.
No.
Ron, I hate to be a pain in the butt too, but if the town manager or the town can give a waiver, there's certain things we would not want to waive. For instance, the standard of radio frequencies.
right. You would
Frequency.
not, right. Right. You would not issue a waiver of that, but you could issue, say, you know, you have a certain setback, say 20 feet to I believe it was a residential area, and 30 for commercial.
That's correct.
Say they were within 2 feet of that, you know, they would ask for a waiver if they were within 28 feet of a commercial area, and they couldn't actually move the pole, you know, a little bit away. They'd be in a roadway. They would ask for a waiver for situations like that, not a waiver for a EME report.
even the suggested language from industry says, finally, where deviation from the standards will serve the public interest. I mean, if it's evident that the deviation from the standards is contrary to the public interest, then a waiver would not be
Right. I
permissible.
mean, there's certain things, Fred, like I talked about 35 versus 50-foot height limit, radio waves affecting residents in town, and certain things you wouldn't want waived. And, I guess we would, the commissioners, the town commissioner and mayor would let the manager know what it is that they would never want waived or wouldn't want waived unless they were involved in it. I'm guessing that.
Well, my recommendation would be that we bolster this language with some additional language, because it shouldn't be that the city manager grants or withholds a waiver based on what the mayor or some other members of council think is appropriate. I mean, we need to reduce it to words.
Okay.
May I make a comment? Ron, are these federal regulations as far as the radio waves and radiation and so forth?
I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
Are certain regulations, for example, the radio frequency regulations, are they controlled by state and federal requirements?
Federal requirements.
So we really couldn't give a waiver on a federal requirement, could we?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Right. So.
Okay. That answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
So just to circle back, in terms of the waiver, Ron, just in terms to circle back, so do we need to tighten that waiver section? Is there anything we need to tighten that?
I would think so. Add some legal language in there and, make it more applicable, but you definitely want a waiver mechanism in there.
Okay.
Mr. Bowers raised his hand.
Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, a couple questions. So, first off, I like what you put together there, Ron. I think these are great improvements. But a couple loopholes that I'm concerned about is the state law as written today is the carrier could always use state-owned land. Is there any way that we can, state-owned land gets either approved from DENREC or from DelDOT? They've both not been issuing permits, but I'm not sure that's a forever thing either. Do we need language in here? And Fred, this might be up your alley on this. Do we need language to protect that based on setting the precedent of what happens here next? I'm sure AT&T is going to ask us one day, and T-Mobile and whoever else. So we're addressing today's need with this ordinance. I'd like to look at it more, with a broader brush, is protect ourselves against everybody. And I think that's the tightening up of the ordinance. So if there was language we can put in there, Fred, I don't know if your thoughts on it, but I think that would be important.
So, Commissioner, I have a question. Our ordinance would apply within our jurisdiction.
Correct.
And our ordinance does not apply along Highway 1. Is that right?
Correct.
Because that's state maintained right of way as opposed to town maintained right of way. Is there state owned property within the town of Dewey Beach that we need to be mindful of? Is that the correct? Is that what you're focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, it's all but 3 streets. We only own 3 streets. The rest of them belong to the state. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to solve this today, but I think this is a research avenue for us. And Ron, the other question I had is, once we charge them for permits, and Jim, you might be able to help me out on this. So it's just based on material, but they also have a deep well of labor bills going into putting poles in. That's probably a bigger expense than it is for that. Do we charge 3% on labor and material, or just material?
All labor and material.
Is labor and material. How does Verizon or any carrier quantify what their labor was on it? Do we need to get into their payroll system, their overtime? It sounds like there's an HR part that we could work with.
Well, when you go out to a contractor, we ask for the actual contract. I mean, we can specify for a breakdown of if they're doing the work.
justify.
Normally Verizon subcontracts out that work to other providers.
Right. And then the third last one I have here. So right now, our ordinance says they can't go higher than 35 feet. Do we want to put something in the language of this? We would perhaps allow 50 foot if it's on the highway to give them a better coverage range and get them off the ocean block streets and dunes.
Isn't that already in? I'm sorry, Paul, I interrupt. Isn't that already in the changes? Section 3, number 1A. That's
50
already there. I
feet is
think
in
it
there,
is.
yeah. We
Yeah, does
just
that-
don't delineate Route 1 in there, though. Route 1 isn't mentioned.
Yeah, I mean,
Mr.
ultimately, I
Powell.
think that's our goal, is to get all of these poles on the highway. But understanding that there may be some extenuating circumstances where it doesn't work for the carrier, and we don't want to get caught up in that effective prohibition. So, I think we need to, be on a straight and narrow on it, be very transparent about it as well. Yeah, that's all I got.
Paul, again, this is Dale Cook. I have a question. You mentioned about on state-owned property, and that's a very good way to put it, because if we said, when we had that argument before about who owns what property, whether it was DelDOT or DENREC, and if you just say state-owned property, which is the right of way, it doesn't matter who owns it,
Both
it's
of
part of the state.
Right.
Right.
So,
Well, that's a
Ron, I
good
mean,
point.
I'm just looking for help from you. Is this ordinance that we're considering passing at some point, is that get into these areas that we really need to get into?
I think it does effectively do that. You have a mechanism now to actually have a voice and say where you want them to go, to steer them where you want them to go. And by opening up that median along Route 1, as well as allowing them to have more height up to the 50-foot
Right.
maximum, you're not prohibiting them, and you're allowing them that alleyway of locating away from the beaches, if they can effectively prove to us that, they don't really need to be at the beach level. They can still provide that capacity and service, 4G and 5G service, from the poles along Route 1.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I
I
have a
mean,
question.
as we notice right now, we have people that, I think Verizon put a pole in front of Nalu's restaurant on the sidewalk where a median strip is 10 feet away. They could have easily put it on there versus on the sidewalk that people were walking on. And, you got a Verizon box hanging on a pole right in front of their door. It's disgusting how they did that thing. Second point is Gary's. They put one right in front of Gary's, whoever rents those condos. They're, 19 feet from the person's window. When you got, and again, I don't think another 20 feet is going to make their effectiveness any better.
See, that's not going to happen anymore, because now we have that mechanism in place, and you're going to have an open rapport with the applicant. They're going to be going back and forth between CTC. We're going to bring you guys into the fold. There's going to be no more polls just popping up out of the blue. You have the mechanism.
Well, hey, there's new people in DENREC and DelDOT, every year, every 6 months. So they're not denying it today, but they never committed to doing it forever for us. So we're doing the one-off stuff versus the, getting the whole pie. So those are my only comments.
My question, let me ask my question real quick. So on the design standard sheet that we have, it says small cell tower wireless utility locations. It says shall not be located on medium or traffic islands. Is that supposed to be in there or not in there?
That'll be removed.
If we're talking about state-owned property, I'm just, because it says it in here.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
This is going to be answered if we get through the design standards, which is the next one.
Okay.
This will be brought up.
Okay. Because I was reading that part. I was like,
And you're absolutely correct, Mr. Thomas. You're right.
Right.
That's what we want.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on the ordinance itself?
Do we need to go through the design standards? Yes. Okay. Ron, can you walk us through the design, or assuming you're the right person, take us through the design standards?
Sure. So we added some general requirements in your design standards document for small cell facilities. And a lot of this was contained in the amendment that I read. But so there's 4 categories for attachments in a right of way: new, replacement, minor, and co-location. So we just give definitions on those, and those are actually definitions according to the FCC definition as well. We added a couple more information points about antennas. You notice the single canister antenna is mentioned in there. I will add some more verbiage about panel antennas in there. We actually added some language about backup power and power connections, especially with all utility lines required for power for these facilities will be buried underground. No overhead wires. That's totally prohibited. We added some language according to cabinets and equipment, especially wiring and cabling will be covered with an appropriate cover, or it will actually be placed inside the pole or wireless support structure. If placed within the pole, it would have to be either a replacement or a new metal pole that's hollow inside. That's where you would actually get the cables and wires inside the pole. Other than that, a wooden pole, replacement pole, it would be inside a conduit. Ground mounted cabinets should be integrated in the structure. So basically it would be in line with the structure itself at the bottom. We reduced the pole mounted cabinet not to exceed 12 cubic feet in volume. It shouldn't be any more than 3 feet in height and 2 feet in width. And then the ground mounted cabinet should not exceed the total 28 cubic feet in volume. We also added language to where the power meter and disconnect is placed to have a clear height of 10 feet. So you have that 10 feet of height in there from a power meter and disconnect. We added some more language on line 73 about power disconnects. Be clearly marked. And the minimum height of the power meter and disconnect should be at a minimum height of 7 feet above ground level. And here we have, starting at line 81, small cell wireless facility locations shall not be installed. We will talk about median traffic islands. The same support structure as a traffic control device. Jim and Bill and I spoke about that this afternoon.
So Ron, so they can't put them inside the metal poles that are up there now?
Streetlight poles?
Yep. Any Delmarva pole? Yeah, because we've talked to them about co-location on those poles.
That would
be a shame to talk to them about it and then not be able to live up our end of the deal.
I don't see any reason why they couldn't, but that would have to be a Delmarva type of approval allowing them to use their facilities and swap them out.
Yeah. So Ron, those metal poles that run up and down Route 1 now, I haven't counted them, but it's probably at least 20 of them. They're up and down the street as it is. You know, Delmarva doesn't prefer to mount on those things. So the answer, if you ask Delmarva, it's going to be a no. We don't want to do it. It interferes with our signal, blah, 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 blah. Is there a way, you know, in your opinion, you know, it's 2 issues. If we could get that one out of the way, would a 50-foot ordinance on highway for safe, highway, installations of poles, they're gonna have to put some new poles in too, instead of all the ones that are there. So is there a way that we can, you could give us a good feeling that if they go on the highway, it's gonna cover the beaches?
Oh, what you're saying is that what we really want is the median strip or those tall metal poles. That's where we want them placed if possible, right? Not
Right.
stopping them from putting them there.
Right.
At this point, let me recognize Jim. Jim
I
Dedes.
just want to make a point. This is the planning commission's meeting. And you all should be the ones that are driving it, and comments, we ought to wait and open it up for comments. Commissioner Bauer, you are actually representing the public at this point. You're a public person, not a commissioner.
That's correct.
So let's hold that and let the planning commission finish asking their questions, please.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Ron, you want to continue with the design review, the design standards?
Sure. So along with the medians and the traffic control devices, we added in any other location that will not interfere or detract from those traffic control devices. Also, the wireless support structure, which is less than 50 feet from the midpoint of any beach access location and at the end of any oceanside street. We have a preferred placement of facilities, first being along Route 1, beachfront hotel and motel rooftops, which would be a co-location. And then minor mods of existing wireless support structures, replacement poles, and the least preferred would be an entirely new facility or pole. We then go down to, we had some changes for placement and siting of small wireless facilities on existing buildings or structures. And then documentation should be required if the co-location cannot be complied with. We also added some language in for new and replacement small cell structures, as well as some setbacks.
Ron, one question. As part of the annual plan or the plan that's submitted, that would be the time at that point where we could approve or try and direct the carrier where that they wanted to place their poles, right? I mean, that would be the time to enter into a discussion with them about what resides on Route 1 versus what resides on the beach or anything like that. Is that correct? That's the point of that plan.
Exactly. So they would give you lat long and coordinates of all of their facilities that they're proposing for that fiscal year before they actually apply for applications and permits for those.
So that's our point of control at that point. If at that plan, they've got to prove to us that they can't get the coverage off of Route 1 with the 50-foot antenna.
Well, they would actually submit an application, then we would see that that application is not in one of your preferred locations, and then we would ask them for the required documentation as to why they couldn't use that preferred location with RF maps, drive test data, or any other data that they want to provide to us, at which time CTC would look through that data and see if it's actually valid or not.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. So along with all the setback requirements that we spoke about, like I said, there may be some waivers needed if they cannot meet certain setback requirements. And then we actually inserted a checklist or chart as to each one of those required documents according to what type of application type there is, whether a new replacement, minor modification, or co-location. And then as well as a condition of approval, we added in the R frequency analysis documents as well in there.
And would that analysis speak to Mr. Cook's concern about what the frequency is that it's actually coming out of the towers?
Right. There's maximum permissible limits set by the FCC, and these EME reports will have the frequency and the distance from those antennas that you need to be outside of, where you are below the permissible limit for exposure.
And would it be appropriate for us to add in here something about an annual recertification? Or is that something that once they go up, and that they would provide us an annual certification at their expense? Is that something that would be appropriate to add in this design standard?
That's something that you could add if they are in compliant with the FCC regulation. Like they could be categorically excluded from providing RF-EME reports if they are below 10 meters in height of the antenna, and if they are below a certain power output according to what frequency. So it gets very nitpicky as far as the categorical exclusion, but even if they're categorically excluded, they still need to give us the information that we require in order to see if they are compliant with that categorical exclusion. So they can't just say we're excluded, we're below 30 feet. We need to see actual proof of that. And that's not unlike any other applications that we deal with on a daily basis.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Ron?
Tim, did you get an answer to your question?
Oh, about the median strip?
Yes, go.
Is that's off limits for the median? Because it says in here that it is off limits.
There is a section, if I might comment on Mr. O'Connor's concern, which is on page 3 of that, and it's number 83.
Yep.
Where it says, all small cells shall not be installed on, I believe, what is it? I crossed it out. What was that?
Medium on traffic.
Or median or traffic signals. We suggested we strike that section out completely.
Okay.
83
Because
is-
we do want them to be on the median.
Okay.
And there is another area that covers for traffic signals that it says it can't obstruct traffic areas. And that was one area that Mr. Zolper, myself, and Mr. Evans discussed, and we recommended, we would like to recommend that area be stricken.
Yeah, which is that again?
83 and 84? 83,
83.
That's the numbered.
Says.
that's a numbered line on the
Design.
standard. Yeah, it's actually under signage, and it's where it's actually under preferred small cell wireless facilities locations.
Right. Oh, okay. So it shall not be installed. That's the change.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what we want. We want
We should just
stricken.
get
That's
rid of
what
one medium. or
that's what
traffic.
Jimmy brought up.
Right. So that's something we want to consider
Right.
amending. Okay.
But
Now,
you
there were
wanna-
a couple others that we recommended that we take a look at. And if you go to the next page, under,
Can't wait before we go to the
Yes,
next
sir.
page. Did you say you wanted to strike
yes,
on same support structure and traffic control devices? Or keep?
no, we wanted to, no, the prohibition on line 83.
I got that.
And it says on same support structure as a traffic control device. That one is kind of, I think we kind of left that, Bill.
So we would want to have the option to put it on a traffic control device if it meets the other criteria that's set out in our ordinance. So if there's a high pole that's holding up a traffic light
And it doesn't obstruct the traffic.
and it doesn't go against any of the other ordinances, we would like to be able to give them the
So
option
you
to
do
put it
want
up.
that strict.
Yes, both
Yeah.
83 and 84, I feel should both be struck.
Okay.
I agree.
You have that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And then if you go to the next area that we had some concerns when we looked at it, was on new replacement. It's on line 119. It's on the 4th page. new replacement, small cell wireless structures. And under line 121, we took out a section and we wanted to read, the new structure shall not interfere with light poles and traffic signals. So if it doesn't interfere, we're okay with them going up. And I think that goes to what you were asking, Mr. Cook.
Right.
So we would strike the section, we would just strike that area and just go shall not interfere with light poles and traffic signals. Okay, and then the line under 122, where it says new structure shall be 100 feet from existing structure, poles and streetlights. We wanted to add language that says if it excludes Route 1. Because there's, we've got
there's
lights
no
and
way.
poles everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, they would never be
way.
able to put anything on
Right.
Route 1.
But do we
So if you
regulate
put
the area?
excluding Route 1, excluding
Well-
Highway 1 at the very beginning, that would do it.
Right. What we do regulate are the streetlights, because we own the streetlights and we're responsible for them. I can attest to that since we had to pay for them. We had to work out a grant to get the money to put them in. And there was a question about 123, the new replacement pole shall be 10 feet from a building face. And we're not sure, is that something, is that enough, or should be a minimum of 10 feet? Ron, you remember that was a discussion we had.
Right.
This is very definitive that it says it has to be 10 feet. Doesn't say it can be more or less. So what we wanted is, has to be at least a minimum of 10 feet.
That's what's intended, I think.
Yes.
But
Is that?
Minimum.
Yes.
Right, so we wanted, the idea would be to insert a minimum of 10 feet. there.
That's correct.
All right.
That's the only comments that we had when we discussed it this morning. And then on page 5, there were several questions. One dealt with setback requirements, and we have a small cell that shall meet a minimum in line 147. It says 30 feet from the nearest residential dwelling. Well, Mr. Zolko brought up a very good point. Many of our properties we have a lot of non-conforming properties that are, some are within 5 or 6 feet from the setback requirement. So 30 feet from that would basically exclude anybody from putting a pole anywhere on that street. So we suggested that put it down to 20 feet maybe to allow them ability, because in the resort business district, resort residential district, the setback is 22 feet. So we thought 20 feet might be a better for those conforming
those,
properties.
Right.
And on commercial, it's actually on the front setback is 22 feet. I believe it's all, no, it's 10 feet.
Yeah.
Commercial, we don't have a whole lot, because if you go to RB2 district, which is the commercial, if you're on Highway 1, the setback is 8 feet.
Right.
So that's where we came up with some suggested, because we don't want to exclude them from putting anything over there. So maybe we should do it on, add a section under number 149 where it deals with commercial, and put it within 8 feet maybe from on commercial areas that are within Route 1, because that is the setback on State Highway.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, so Jim, are you suggesting we modify that bullet or add another sub bullet underneath it that specifically speaks to commercial properties on Route 1?
Well, maybe we should. What do you think, Ron? On line 1.
I agree.
Okay, so we should add one for specifically on Route 1. They have to be at least 8 feet from
Minimum.
any building,
A minimum, right?
a minimum of
Yeah,
8 feet.
minimum.
Of everything, okay. And then on line 158, I think we covered it actually on number, take that back, we may not have to do it. On line 58, we talk small wireless facilities must be at a minimum setback distances 10 feet from the nearest tree. And we thought Are you kidding? We've got trees all over the place on Route 1. So we suggested we exclude Route 1 in King Charles.
Okay.
King Charles.
Well, King Charles is, I guess, 1A.
Mhm.
Yeah, so maybe we should King Charles /1A. And that's all we had as far as our comments. Yep.
So we would leave, your suggestion is leave it there, but then add.
Add excluding Route 1 and King Charles Route 1A.
Yeah, okay. And in that case, they could locate as close to the trees they want. Is that what we're
Yes.
saying, right? Because of the number of trees.
Well, that's what our suggestion was. You'll have
Right.
to decide if that's appropriate. But our feeling was in some areas, it's nicer to put it closer to a tree because it
Covers
makes it a little bit more stealth.
Right,
We have the trees on the center aisle.
right. Okay.
I think the main issue with setback distance from trees was to not disturb the roots of the tree. It's usually when these, the wooden poles are put in the ground, it's 10% of the height plus an additional 2 feet.
Yeah.
So if you have a 40-foot pole, it's going 6 feet in the ground.
And most of the trees on Route 1 are very small
Right.
trees.
Okay.
On line 127, 126, 127, talk about permanent objects. I noticed the question there said, what does permanent objects mean? Did we answer that question? Is there a definition for that? I just noticed it in there.
What would you suggest that means? That was a question I think we actually put into that.
It could be a bus stop, depot, a street side bench, any type of pedestrian type of object. Those are two that come to mind mostly that would be in the right of way.
We wouldn't consider street lights and that permanent objects. Is that what we're saying?
No, this would be other than those
'Cause they can
objects.
be moved. Okay.
Right. So do we need to define, I guess, to back to Mr. Cook's question, permanent, is there a need to define permanent, or is that?
Could it be in definitions?
We could add something in there such as, bus depot, or I could come up with a
Yeah,
couple
that's
of examples to add in there if you folks would like that added in.
We would put that in the definition
In the
section.
definition
Yeah.
section? Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments at this point on the, no?
Well, we're gonna have something in it that specifically states that our main goal is to have as many as possible on the center island or on the large Delmarva poles. I mean, that's our real goal, to get them away from everybody else, away from the side street, and have them, because we're not controlling the height on the center island anyway. So something should say that our main goal was to put them on the center island and or the Delmarva utility pole. And I think that's what the public has asked for also.
It is under preferred locations.
Right.
Are you saying we should?
Okay. I want, and when they come back to listen to the minutes of this meeting, that's what we're looking for.
That's correct.
That's what we want, so.
Okay. All right, at this point,
Public comment?
hey, should we open it up for public comment? Is that appropriate?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Paul, go ahead.
Anybody there?
who do we have in the waiting room? Okay, and I'm just gonna, if I could ask here that we keep our comments to approximately 3 minutes. And as you come on here, if everyone could identify themselves, their name and address, so we have that connection. Thank you. Hello, Marianne.
Yes,
Good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. If you could just start by stating your name and your address, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Mary Ann Tabrizi, and my address is 16 Dagsworthy Avenue in Dewey Beach.
Thank you. Go ahead with your comments.
So I first wanted to thank thank everybody for the opportunity to speak, and thank all the members of the Planning and Zoning Committee for all your work on this ordinance. I know the complexity, I appreciate that, and the issues surrounding the deployment of this 5G equipment. So I'm speaking to you this evening, kind of wearing 3 different hats. I'm a Dewey Beach property owner since 2017, and I've been coming to Dewey Beach for over 20 years. Second, I'm the HOA president of the Perch Townhome community, which is on Dagsworthy, where 14 townhouses located Oceanside, Dagsworthy Avenue, across from the life-saving station. I'm not there tonight. I'm actually in Bethesda, or I would be physically there with you. And third, I am a board member of a new citizens group called Coastal Stewards, Delaware. And this is a new group, and we're a coalition of concerned citizens dedicated to preserving the seascape and natural beauty of small coastal towns focused along Delaware, but small coastal towns really anywhere. Rick Myers, a colleague of mine, is also going to speak. And we have a website called coastalstewards.net if you're interested in learning more about this citizens coalition. So I just have 5 comments, suggestions on the ordinance I wanted to share. The first one is I don't see any mention of environmental review or historic review of any 5G applications. This would be NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and it's a federal review of placement of 5G poles, both for historic preservation and as well as impacts to the human environment. So the FCC has declared that every individual wireless telecommunications facility application must undergo NEPA review. And so I encourage the committee to look including that in the ordinance. Dewey Beach, we have a lot of history here. We always don't recognize that. We have an environmental beauty of our seascape, of our small town, and we should be preserving that. An example of that is, even our life-saving station location, not the building itself, but the grounds it sits on is probably one of the most historical places in Dewey Beach. And we should be preserving that, honoring that, recognizing that. And so having a historic or environmental review is critical to saving our town and preserving this little beach town history that we have. So the second, I know we're doing an ordinance. There are other model communities, I think Rick Myers might talk to, that are doing a strategy. So we can have an ordinance which says where we'd like these poles to go, or these small cell facilities, but where is actually the need, and developing a strategy to see coverage areas and looking at, the needs of our community. Where is the coverage needed? Trying to put poles on the beach. People are only there 3 months out of the year. What about our residents that need assistance, and the mainstream restaurants, bars, everything is up Route 1. So I applaud you for trying to get them on Route 1. But again, coming up with a strategic approach of coverage, not just where Verizon would like to put them, but where is the need, and having some type of strategy. Third, talking about a different concept, and maybe this can be introduced to the ordinance too. It's called the concept of best available technology, economically available, or BATEA. And possibly including that in the ordinance. So best available technology economically available, or BATEA, is a federal code which says that these installations shouldn't be using the cheapest types of things, but local ordinances can include this BATEA language that talks about, making sure the design standards are there, and that when these telecommunication companies are coming in, that they're taking consideration of the aesthetics, and they're not just using COTS or commercial off-the-shelf equipment, which is the cheapest, less expensive stuff that you can put up. So again, possibly putting that BATEA, and Coastal Stewards is happy to talk with you further about that language into the ordinance that states, don't just use the cheapest stuff. We're a small town, we care. Let's try to get them to put in aesthetically pleasing equipment. Fourth, we're on the spotlight right now, Dewey Beach, good or bad, about this dilemma we have with 5G. We've been in the paper. I know there's a active lawsuit. The media has been on us. We've had a citizen protest. So we have the opportunity to really do this right. And I applaud the committee in taking the time, and the commissioners, to really dig through this and do it right. But, I encourage you, and hopefully we can do this right. So we're a model for other small coastal towns. We're a model for Delaware. Let's do it right since we're in the spotlight. And then fifth, Coastal Stewards of Delaware. We have a lot of people on the board and on the committee of our members that have a lot of knowledge about these things like NEPA and BATEA. And we'd love to work with the committee to help guide you and give recommendations to how to make this ordinance and our strategy for 5G the best it can be for Dewey Beach, because we all love this town and we want to do the best we can do. So again, we're Coastal Stewards Delaware. Our website is coastalstewards.net. And again, thank you so much for all your time and allowing me to share some comments.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions or anything like that?
We might.
Thank you, Miriam. Very, very good points you bring up.
Do you want to ask for?
Yeah, does anyone have?
Well, Mr. Evans, would you mind commenting on the reference to NEPA and to the BATEA? I think those were the more specific of the five. Are there allowances for these concepts in the recommended, or either in the existing ordinance or in the recommendations for amending the ordinance?
We did add the FCC NEPA requirement in page 8 of the design standards. So whenever an applicant is submitting an application for a small wireless facility, that is one of the criteria that they will have to fulfill. So that's added in there. The BEATEA, I'm not familiar with that organization.
So that concept was best available technology, or best available economically reasonable technology, or something. Does the existing ordinance, or do you feel in your expertise this is an area that we can regulate in, where we insist that industry not make use of the least common denominator or poorest examples of technology that are on the market? Is that an area we can regulate in your estimation?
I'm not familiar with that, so I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen that type of language added to any municipality's ordinance as of yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar.
My view on that might be simply because I think we all understand what's being suggested. It's difficult, if not impossible, to reduce that to an enforceable standard, that can easily make its way into a regulation. I don't think anyone's opposed to the concept of it. I'm sure they're not, but it may be difficult to distinguish
Oh, good. How you doing?
Mr. Bauer, we're hearing you. Now he muted himself. Okay. So anyway, that's enough said about that topic for now. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So the historic and environmental standards that you mentioned are something that, if I understood correctly, it's regulated by federal regulation. Is that right?
So the NEPA is, in fact, that was put in based on a member of the coastal community group that the last speaker commenter spoke about. So that's why that was added in there. As far as the historical preservation, there is some research that was done on that that's been brought to my attention. That would be part of the FCC, but we could add more language.
Okay.
If it's part of the FCC, can we just require that we see the report as part of the application rather than make it part of the?
It's included, as I recall, Ron, at least for the NEPA, the FCC NEPA, that's in the rules, the FCC rules. And that's a checklist that we've determined we want to look at. As far as historical, since we don't have any historical structures here, at least that I'm aware of, that have been in the National Register, I mean, you could put it in down the road, it might, if you wait another 50 years, we might have some historical structures if we haven't been swamped by the sea, but.
Bill.
We may have to do some additional research on that. The building we're sitting in here is a replica of a historical structure, and since it is that, it may actually, under some definitions, fall under historical structure, but we have to do some more research, and I think that's what she was referring to.
Okay. So at this point, if everyone's agree, can we, it would make sense maybe do a little more research on that historic aspect.
Right.
And I don't know, Fred, if we want to consider doing more research into the other BAETA. I know I don't have all the initials right there, but whether or not that's.
We
something
can
consider.
talk to Ron afterwards.
Right.
And see if that's something that, if it's something that we can add, I guess we will with the permission of the planning commission. If not, we can have some leeway on that.
Well, it could be, the planning commission could note that as an area of interest, and
Okay.
perhaps something, perhaps some kind of amendment could be brought to the commissioners along with your recommation.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, let's proceed on this.
Public
So,
comment.
Mr. Meyer.
Dave?
All right, and so at this point, can we, Mr. Meyer, could we bring Mr. Meyer into the? Mr. Meyer, if you would please state your name and your address. Oh, sorry. See these. There he is.
Looks young.
Yeah, he does.
Is that a high school picture?
It's before that.
Great.
Mr. Meyer, can you hear us?
I
can hear you.
can hear you. Good evening. Are you able to see my image? I'm not sure there how that works.
Yeah. We
Let's try that. Okay. Hi there. There we go. I'm Rick Meyer, and I am not a resident, full disclosure, of Dewey Beach. I am a property owner in unincorporated Suffolk County, just over the canal in Salt Pond from Bethany Beach. And Miriam is a very hard act to follow, but I am a co-board member with her, and we're very fortunate to have her on the board of coastalstewards.net. If I may just quickly, what is coastalstewards.net again? And Miriam mentioned, our focus really is on protecting, preserving, enhancing the seascapes of coastal Delaware, probably our most precious asset, which has attracted so many of us for so long to this part of the world, and we're very proud of it. One of the things that we're working on right now is working with all of the communities from Lewis to Rehoboth to Dewey to Fenwick and Bethany and all points in between. We're very concerned about some of the construction that's happened along Route 1, along the Delaware Seashore Park. And in fact, we've already raised some inquiries with the State Attorney General's office about how those poles went in and what are they doing there. But what I'm focused on tonight, and I want to thank you, as Miriam has done, for all the hard work that you're doing, because this really is a very complicated and difficult thing. My full-time residence, I hope to retire soon, is in Montgomery County, Maryland. And in Montgomery County, Maryland, I serve as the executive director of the Montgomery County Coalition for the Control of Cell Towers, Inc. And we're a nonprofit organization that is focused on transparency and fairness in wireless regulation. And I've been doing that for about 5 years, and in fact have been working with other members of the CTC organization, because Montgomery County, Maryland is also a client of CTC. But if I may just quickly, I wanted to echo what Miriam said. This ordinance is not a strategy, and it is not a substitute for a master plan. And wireless telecommunications, regardless what the wireless industry might want small towns to believe, does not allow or force an exemption from planning and from master planning.
The proposal had one type of antenna, I think a canister. And Verizon said some people use panel antenna versus canister antenna. Is there any problem with putting both types in the?
I think your YouTube,
in the
YouTube sites on.
Not at all. The language that's in there is basically boilerplate language with the rest of ordinances that we provide for other municipalities.
Yeah, hang on a second. I hit the wrong button here. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There we go. Thanks, sir.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hit the wrong button. I'm technologically challenged, and I apologize for that. But anyway, continuing what I was going to say about this not being a plan, I would urge this group, as well as the town council, to understand that the 800-pound gorilla in the room, as you discuss this ordinance, is the poles that were placed purportedly on state right-of-ways, but obviously some of them wound up on town right-of-ways, excuse me. You've got to address a strategy on where you want those poles to go. If you are successful, and I sorely hope you are, clearly there has been funds set aside by the state, and I hope that this actually gets affected, to move those poles. Simply moving them back 50 feet is not a solution. And I would urge you with CTC to understand that building a strategy that would really give consideration on where you need the technology and where you want the technology, and that word "want" is something that the town, through its aesthetics and its procedures, can actually drive. And you don't have to be intimidated by this word "effective prohibition." It's a very hard standard to prove. As long as you're putting things in writing, and as long as you're basing it on a plan, and that you clearly show that you are going to be allowing technology, you should be able to get away with it. Let me just also say, to answer what Miriam said very quickly, there are other examples of other towns, particularly the town of East Hampton, New York, which has built a comprehensive strategy which involved actually talking to residents and surveying residents, measuring the existing equipment out there, and building a plan. East Hampton, New York is a coastal community. I would also have you recommend that you take a look at they have retained a different consultant. That consultant is named Cityscapes, but it is a very significant process that I think Dewey Beach would be well served on. It's a compact town. It's hard to find locations that are going to be able to fit this stuff, and you've got some real challenges ahead of you for that. The second town.
Mr. Meyer,
yes,
Mr. Meyer, if I could, we're here on the ordinance and on the design standards tonight. We've got a more narrow focus, and we're certainly, I'm sure, interested in hearing what you have to say with regard to broader strategies, and we can take those comments at any time. But do you have anything specific you'd like to focus on regarding the ordinance and the design standards that are on the agenda tonight?
Yes, I do. Very, very specifically, if I can drill into that. I think you have put a feature in there that is very, very impressive, and that is, and I believe it's still in there, that you're saying that you want a pole to be set back at least twice the height of the pole. If I do my math, that's somewhere between 60 and 100 feet, depending on whether or not the pole's allowed to go in at, 70 or 100 feet, depending on whether the pole goes in at 35 feet or 50 feet. But I believe you're saying a double setback. Your challenge in Dewey Beach is finding a lot where you can get a 60-foot or 100-foot setback. I encourage you to do it. I love it. But you've got a very compact town. You've got some challenges on that. The second thing I would thank you on very much, you have written in specific language that requires each of these facilities to conform with section 47 CFR 1307, which are the radio frequency emissions. And these wireless providers are putting up some very, very powerful, very high intensity antennas, and actually mandating that they are complying with that in your ordinance is an excellent thing. So those are compliments, but I wanted to let you know that we have, as Miriam has said, we have resources. We'd love to work with the town, and we thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Bauer?
Mr.
Yeah,
Persinger.
and this
Yeah.
is for Rick and Ron.
Yes.
No, I'm good. Question was, and it was probably Jim Dedes, you helped me out with this, and Bill Zolper. When did we do that conference call with Rick and Ron? Because one of my big requests a number of months back was, can we ask Verizon to give us, and every carrier, give us a master plan? We're 1 mile long. I mean, this is like a college campus, et cetera. I'm sure, you can come up with a whole approach. And I thought the answer that you gave me is that you couldn't do that. That wasn't within the scope of work. So are you now saying that it is part of the scope of work, Rick?
I'm saying that it's in your ordinance right now. You're requiring them, if I have the correct draft, and if you haven't amended it, you are requiring them to submit an annual plan. And you've also said, which I do not have in Montgomery County, and I think it's phenomenal wording, you're not going to let them put a pole in unless it's in your annual plan. And so the answer is you absolutely can require that.
Excuse me, gentlemen. This isn't a forum for public comment back and forth between folks in the room. So if we could come back to just making comments on the ordinance.
Got it.
Okay.
Mr.
All right.
Persinger.
Mr. Persinger, did you?
Very patient.
Yeah, Mr. Persinger, did you want to make comments?
It goes back a ways. It was just about the best available technology, economically achievable. And the only point I was making there was that I can see, I just did a quick Google search. I can see where that has been applied in other areas, particularly with respect to EPA. But if there's anything specific to telecommunications, if the speaker could offer that, provide that, that would be very helpful. If there's anything out there, or maybe some other applications where in fact this notion has been applied. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will consider that, take that into as we revise the ordinance. Mr. Seitz, did you want to add anything, Marty? Marty, you're muted.
You're muted.
Turn your speaker on.
Your mic, yeah.
Yeah, Marty, you're muted.
Mic.
And we still can't hear you.
Mr. Seitz, turn your mic on.
Let me unmute. Unmute.
There you are, Marty. We can hear you now.
How's that?
Good.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to comment. I'm actually a planning commissioner, and unfortunately, I've been out of commission since March with some health issues, and I'm right now under the supervision of the medical staff here at Mercy Hospital in Baltimore. So I've got my own room, and I've got my cell phone is about it. But good seeing Gary Persinger and Dale and Paul and others that I've worked with over the years. But the comment I wanted to make, I think, is focused more on the strategy or the concept of how we're developing this. And I look at two things. One is the communication companies that have been proposing 5G or 4G plus systems are really proposing the least expensive systems possible. And I see that they could install these systems for less than $50,000. So they're a chunk of money, but it's not an enormous amount. I also see that the town will suffer a loss of real estate value in the tens of millions of dollars. And this is implication to what the seascape is doing, what the busyness of the streets are, what the poles in the middle of sidewalks and so forth would cause. And I say that just from my own point of view. I think my property would suffer, say, $10,000 loss in property value with poles as they've been proposed. But you multiply that by 1,000 other residents and you get the $10 million that I'm talking about. And these are the people that are calling in and complaining about this system because nothing here for the citizen. I mean, I'm not using 5G. I have no interest in 5G, and nor do many of the other people. And we're not going to be collecting any revenue for the town or otherwise from these systems. And what I recommend is that the town should require that these communication companies ameliorate through their design at least 50% of the loss of real estate value caused by their installations. That would mean that they're not going to be applying the least expensive. They're going to get more sophisticated receivers that don't have to be separated by 200 feet or cannot be co-located with anything closer than 50 feet, that they're using private commercial property instead of poles that they have to lease or buy, which is another expense that they don't want to embrace. But they could come up with something that's more pleasant and less impactful on the seascape that we're talking about. And I think it's a reasonable thing for us to ask for. I think it's consistent with what Representative Schwarzkopf would accept. Senator Lopez would accept. It's a reasonable position for the state, for the town to ask for some amelioration of these detrimental effects to their real estate values. I think that this could be put in, I've got a paragraph here that would insert in section 2 of the ordinance, if we were to want to adopt that. I think it fits very well into the good work that people have been doing in terms of the requirements for these wireless systems. That's all I have. Just a personal effect. I'm still under supervision of the medical community, but I hope to be released completely by the 1st of January, 2022, and I'll be up and running again at that point. So thank you for your patience and consideration.
Thank you, Marty. Appreciate it. At this time, Fred, I'd like to close public comments. Is that appropriate?
I think so. Yep.
All right. Do I need a motion to do?
You can declare the public hearing.
Okay. So at this point, we're going to close public comment. And I guess we'd like to go around the table, I guess, get everybody's comments on what we've heard. And I guess the ultimate thing we need to decide is how we're going to move forward, how we want to amend this. So start with you.
I'm okay.
You
Fine
okay?
right now.
Jimmy, good as well.
No comments?
Well, I just think that we said that we were going to make an addendum to our report. We talked about, Fred, you talked about it, a request to the commissioners that would cover certain things that wouldn't be in the design standards or the ordinance. And I thought that a couple comments that were made by the people that spoke, a master plan yearly from the company. If that's required or can be required, then we should make that part of the requirements or part of the request at the commissioners.
It's in there. That's in
I
the
mean,
ordinance.
that is the annual plan,
That's
right?
That's the annual plan.
Oh, it is in
The annual plan.
requiring a master plan.
Well, it doesn't use the term master plan, but they're required to tell us in advance on a yearly basis by this proposed addition to the design.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or to the
I didn't
ordinance.
see that. Okay. And Fred, you mentioned that we do the historical environmental standard in that sidebar request to the commissioners.
Mhm.
And best available technology somewhere should be mentioned. That's all.
So ultimately, this group is going to recommend or may well recommend that council adopt the modifications, the proposed modifications to the ordinance and to the design standards, but may also include a suggestion that council consider additional areas of interest, which are these best available, economically achievable technologies and some historical preservation style considerations in the adoption of the final ordinance.
Got it.
All right, great. Okay. I have no further comments. I mean, we've kind of all discussed at this point, so.
I guess you need a motion.
So,
Yeah, I guess, how's the best way, since we've talked about a number of changes
yeah.
here.
So the number of changes is more than just a couple. And is it fair to say that of all the suggestions that were made that came from staff, that there was general agreement among council that those changes be incorporated into the ordinance that you might recommend approval of?
I would say yes. So
I would say yes.
Mhm. Okay, so I think you can task me with staff to incorporate those changes into the design standards into the ordinance, if you're ready to move the ordinance for recommended approval.
So at this time, I guess I'd like to ask for a motion that we, as a group, allow Mr. Townsend and the Stees and Bill Zolper to make the incorporated changes we've talked about, discussed here today, and if we all and move it forward, I guess, to the commissioners at that point. So do I have a motion to commission? And could I ask for a second?
Second.
Okay. Let's have a vote. Are we all in favor of that?
Yes.
We
Aye.
need to word it.
I think that's sufficient. I think it's understood that the motion is to recommend approval of the ordinance with the changes that have been suggested by staff, and I will be tasked to help write those up, and I'll refer, I think, to Mr. Evans as well for assistance in doing that. I think that's what the motion is, and I think that's what you
just approved.
What you just approved, right?
All right. All right. Any other comments at this point?
We have to move also to any changes in the design standard.
I think they're I meant for them to be incorporated in the motion when I restated the motion, that the design standards and ordinance are being moved forward together. Do you have specific items in the design standards you want to focus on? No. Okay.
Okay. I just want to make a note that our next meeting of planning and zoning is scheduled for November 13th at 12:30 here at the lifeguard station. The next one, I believe, the clause application, conditional use application is on the agenda for that session. So, all right. If there's nothing else, then I'll ask for a motion to close.
Could I just thank Mr. Evans for his invaluable support through this process? It's a very tedious process to look over that ordinance and make suggestions and look and review the design standards. And I know we're all very grateful for your involvement in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?